Antonina of the Computational Humanities Research Group here at King's College London. Today, I'm very pleased to have Dr. Antonina Puchkovskaia, who is a lecturer in digital products and industries here at the Department of Digital Humanities at King's College London. Antonina is a cultural historian specializing in computational humanities with particular expertise in network analysis and feminist approaches to recovering marginalized narratives. She joined King's in 2022. And previously, she was Associate Professor of Digital Humanities at ITMO University, which she founded and led the Digital Humanities Center. Her research combines archival scholarship with computational methods to examine cultural networks, and her current project, developed in collaboration with Royal College of Music, maps women's musical and creative labor in early 20th century London. So we are looking forward to hearing about Marion Scott Revisited, Visualizing Women's Cultural Networks in Early 20th Century London. Antonina, the floor is yours.
Okay, so almost synchronized. Thank you very much and good afternoon. And thank you for the introduction and thank you for inviting. And actually, thank you for having this group. And as we spoke recently, there are not that many digital humanities or computational humanities people in the department, surprisingly. So yeah, it's good to have a good crowd to talk about the research. So I'd like to begin with the methodological sort of challenge. So how do we computationally analyze something that is not there? And when working with the cultural data and specifically within the sort of marginalized groups, as for example, women in the beginning of 20th century, we kind of confront the archives that shaped by bias, and some of the archival records preserved quite well, and some of the records are quite fragmentary. So Marion Scott, who knows who she is? Okay, good. Okay, we have one person in the room, so just for the people online who knows who she was. So she kind of, in our perception, exemplifies this kind of like challenge quite perfectly. So she was, as we probably say today, she wore many hats. She was many things. She was a music critic. She was a violinist, a trained violinist. She was a musicologist. She was also co-founder of the Society of Women Musicians. And yet her archival sort of presence remains quite dispersed and incomplete compared to her male counterparts. So these archival disparity reflective in a broader historiographical pattern. And I'd like to share this particular quote on the slide. This is the Byron Adams dismissive review of Pamela Blevin's biography of Ivor Gurney, where he characterizes Scott as merely, quote, a wealthy amateur whose modest career would have gone unremembered but for her massive crush on Ivor Gurney. Also saying that, claiming that Marion Scott was a social or musical force is a risky business indeed. So in a way, our research questions, which like three of those are on the slides, kind of emerge from this tension. And in a way, we wanted to prove Byron Adams to be wrong. And when we start thinking about it, we thought about how can we merge to different methodologies like musicology, traditional sort of approach to archival, documents, and also computational methodologies, particularly social network analysis, because we want to see Marion Scott influence and kind of impact, contribution through the connections and things she's done and sort of the activities she sort of enabled. In a way. So we also wanted to see how can we develop the computational humanities approaches that account for biases in both the archives and also our own sort of DH or computational humanities methodologies and choices. So in this kind of way, we sort of our methodological approach kind of operates a bit against the prevailing kind of big data turn. So we particularly wanted to focus on the small data approach again, as I said, so the archive is not that massive, but still we wanted to tackle this approach focusing on depth, context, and careful construction from fragmentary evidence, acknowledging that the process of collection and preservation of data themselves are shaped by kind of power and gender dynamics. But if you start something like this, if you start thinking about like one person, the first thing, which is the methodological limitation and the bias, is what we call ego network problem. And it happened to us because, again, so we thought about Marion Scott particularly, so we started collecting the data around her. But throughout the research, we try to sort of explicit this, like this particular bias, can acknowledge this explicitly and try to find the way around it. But just to let you know, we do aware that it's a risky business indeed to do to start with one person only. So whilst we start with Marion Scott as our focal point, as I mentioned, for data collection, we also wanted to try and test another hypothesis, and as my collaborator called it, a hunch, that we do know when the Society of Musicians was launched, it was particular 1911, and we wanted also to kind of prove that something happened. We see that the merger, like, or increase of connections, increase of activities around this particular years. So we wanted to, again, so kind of like balance the ego network problem with this particular hypothesis that we wanted to prove. Kind of like believing that even in collections dominated by male voices, careful computational methods can surface marginalized women voices and bring hidden networks and alternative locus of power and influence to the fore. On to the archives research. So we started with Royal College of Music archives, particularly, and currently we're only sort of doing the Royal College of Music archives, knowing that there are other archives about this particular women that I'm going to mention exist in Royal Academy of Music and others, but we started with this particular archive. So if you kind of Google the archive, if you try to search on it, so it will be roughly 85 catalog entries related to Marion Scott. And again, a bit of astereotypical for the social network analysis specifically. We're not only looking at the correspondence, we're also looking at the minutes, committee minutes, programs, score, everything related to sort of Marion Scott. Again, to try to prove that she wore many hats and she was many things, and kind of like try to visualize, depict and determine these various and diversified kind of activities. In terms of another kind of methodological approach, we adopted a middle distance reading, which was really well depicted and kind of described in this recent book, Feminist Digital Humanities, by Lisa Rhodey and Susan Schreibman. And this is basically the approach that combines the traditional scholarship or close reading, what we call it, and computational humanities or distant reading, trying to actually make them kind of work in a like balancing each other, complement each other, and try to find not only treat DH or computational humanities as a method or tool, but also try to find something beyond just the analysis, but also try to look at the even parameters of social network analysis through quite like theoretical perspective. I'm going to talk about is that we did, like, in 2 years, we actually did find something more than a parameter. So on to the data set. So this is the data set that we start collecting, and it's still ongoing. So the work is still in progress. And this was collected manually and still collecting. We collected this manually and collected in terms of, we do know that we want to apply social network analysis. So this is basically the source name and the target name that the social network analysis needs in terms of the sort of edges and nodes that it operates on and within. But then we added some more like a bit of a subjective kind of columns, which is relationship type, which is based on the musicology expertise my colleague has from Royal College of Music, and also kind of like a document type. But we do have like document references. Basically, this is the number in the archive, and the location, not of the archive, but sort of like of the archival record. So where it was, if it's a letter that it was sent from London, for example, or if it's a concert program, then the concert took place, I don't know, in Glyndebourne, for example. And what also interested is that we would try to again, a bit deviate from algorithm-driven approach that we did subjectively kind of, again, create the column called weight. So we did assign the weights for the connections of the people in our data set. And so the score of 1 means someone is simply referenced in the document. So she was a musicologist and music critic. So if she mentioned someone in her lecture, for example, this would be 1. Then the 2 is acquaintance of a single documented contact. They made 1, so exchange 1 letter. And the 3 means a teacher or mentor or regular contact. For example, someone's got interacted with repeatedly in a structured way. And then 4 is a peer or sustained engagement. And then 5 is a family or intimate partnership with Ivagoni, who was her not only crushed, but he was like, they were partners before he died. And this is like, again, so this is a very subjective, arbitrary kind of column based on the musicology expertise my colleague has. And we did it on purpose, but then I'm going to show that I did run the analysis with and without to see how our expertise aligned with the algorithm expertise. So, which was quite a fun experiment. So to talk a little bit about, so I'm gonna, demographics of the data set, because the one that I showed you recently, so this is the 1 tab, the 2nd tab is basically all the unique names within our data set with the gender, identified gender, nationality, occupation, and some other kind of notes and stuff. So within the demographics of the whole data set, we have almost 500 individuals. 251 of them are men and 215 are women, so it's roughly 55%, 45%. If we look at most studies of early 20th century musical networks, they are overwhelmingly male, understandably, but Scott's network isn't, and this tells us something about the kind of connections that she was building. So in terms of the nationality, again, quite understandably, the network is heavily English. It's nearly 8%, but there are other nationalities. There are 16 French people, 12 Scottish, 9 Irish, and then there are smaller numbers of Italian, German, Russian, Hungarian, Welsh, and American. So overall, there are 35 different nationalities. And in terms of the occupation, the most common role by far is a composer, with 194 mentions, and then the pianist and the violinist and conductor, and something interesting around this gender perspective is that women outnumber men among instrumentalists, 81 to 73, and dramatically outnumber them among singers, 65 to 20. But men dominate conducting and composition, again, quite understandably for the beginning of 20th century. And now on to the sort of analytical methods. So as I said, so we when we did kind of start brainstorming this particular project, I kind of offered and advised that we might try social network analysis just because it might be the way of depicting these connections, and through this connection to understand the influence and the impact of a person, and also kind of argue or claim that she was some sort of like creative leader or like influence, even how we might name her now. So within the social network analysis, we did employ 4 complementary approaches. So the first was centrality analysis to identify the key figures within the whole and their structural positions within the whole network. Second was between centrality, and this particular bit quite fascinated my collaborator because we're now thinking of it beyond the parameter, which again, I'm going to talk a little bit more later when I show the analysis bit. And between a centrality as a parameter, as a SNA parameter, identifies the brokers, the people who connect otherwise separate groups. And the third, community detection, and I start with the, I hope I pronounce it correctly, Louvain method, because it's quite popular and common, but I did try, and I'm going to show you there's a bit of a difference, two other methods, just to understand whether each of this method depicts the, and sort of detects the same amount of distinct communities within her network. And finally, the temporal analysis, just to understand and kind of like prove the point that I made about the particular year, or like particular years around 1911 when Society of Women Musicians was launched, and whether it somehow, you know, impact the whole thing and boost the visibility of women and their activities. So starting with the degree centrality, and again, so the slides, so roughly I did analysis within the data set that has assigned weighting, so that's why it's called the slide called weighted degree centrality, and I did several without, and I'm going to show you the difference, but mainly the idea still has this musicology expertise at core. So as you see, within the degree centrality, which again, quite important parameter, but it's quite obvious. If you're collecting something around a very particular person, this person would be central. And Marion's score is quite, you see that she shows like quite a high degree centrality. But what is interesting wasn't our necessarily hypothesis, even if we knew that the Society of Musicians was co-founders, so the mother founders of the Society of Musicians alongside Marion Scored was Catherine Eager and Lisa Lehman. So, but we didn't specifically thought about them, and we see even without, like, if we exclude Marion Scott, so still other people kind of pop up as quite central, including Catherine Eager, Lisa Lehman, and also Elsie Horn. And we see that the top 5 is actually top 4 women, which again, we found quite fascinating. So speaking about, and again, so I sorry about the pictures, but this is like, this is how it looks, the graph does look like, and I did do this in the 3D version as well, so it's a bit more funnier than this one. But yeah, but it's nice to play around it so you can zoom in, zoom out, and see how actually these people were connected. So in terms of the sort of the degree centrality, just tells you basically who has the most friends, who's the most popular kind of in a network. Between a centrality, ask a different question. So if you pick any 2 people in the network and find the shortest path between them, how often does that path go through a particular person? So basically, this is the person who kind of, you know, acts as a broker, as an enabler, as a bridge, sort of bridging other people and make their connection possible. So Marion's score between us is again quite high, and understandably so. And she basically, in our current data set, is 90% of all the shortest path in the entire network. Catherine Eager is the second, Lisa Lehman is the third. And what this basically tells us is that is a hub and spoke network, and Marion's score is kind of like a hub. So she sort of initiates lots of relations, initiates lots of activities, and sort of like acting as a person who was at core of this all connections. So this kind of, another crucial kind of methodological point is that this finding holds up regardless of how we measure connection strength. So even when I run the analysis without the assigned weighting, Marion's score would still be, so kind of like the order or the ranking of the people would be the same. I mean, the numbers would be slightly different, but interestingly, without the assigned weighting, her between a centrality even sort of larger, slightly bigger, large. So it's 0.925 with the original weighted sort of data set, and the 0.936 with the one that done by sort of the algorithm. But the top 10 between a centrality are identical in both methods, which again kind of proves that the expertise that my colleague has around the musicology in this particular period are kind of like proved. And we can sort of rely on it. So in sociological terms, what Scott occupied is what Ron Burt calls structural holes. She sat in the gaps between otherwise separate clusters, enabling flows of information, artistic collaboration, and professional opportunities across boundaries and other people couldn't cross. And that's what makes her a creative enabler or a leader. And this is a particular claim that we're trying to make sort of here. And sort of not that she composed the most, not that she performed the most, or she was like a better performer, but that she made it possible for other people to find each other, collaborate, and sort of build careers and communities. So now I am going to show you, so these are the 3D, it's actually interactive one. So if you go on the Collab notebook, you can actually play around those. But these are the 3 methods that I earlier spoke about, that basically all of them does the same job. They try to detect the very distinct communities. So the Louvain method, I pronounce Louvain, is the most commonly used, as I said. So it works from the bottom up, greedily merging nodes into groups to maximize something called modularity. And so the basically does depicts that we have 11 communities with a modularity roughly 0.5. Another one is the Leiden, which is a bit of a refinement of this particular method, and it adds a step that checks whether the communities it finds are actually internally well connected, fixing a known weakness in Louvain, where communities can end up internally fragmented. And the final one was so this one, and this is still run on the weighted or assigned weights data set. So this now depicts 13 communities. Again, the biggest one is still around the same people, but it just adds up 2 more communities. And the final one, which is German-Newman, its methods work completely differently. Instead of building communities up, it tears the network apart by repeatedly removing the edges that carry the most shortest paths, which are the bridges between groups, until the network naturally fragments into clusters. But what's most importantly is that each of the community represent distinct sub-networks with a particular professional focus, demonstrating that Scott's network contained multiple loci of female leadership and influence. These women were not only simply participating in one community, they were bridging between different musical circles, performing essential connective work. I know we talk about the sort of the comparison. This is basically, I have 2 slides. The one, as I said, so I did run both analysis on the weighted and non-weighted sort of data set. So pretty much these are the same. So the biggest community is centered on Marion Scott. The second largest is around Catherine Eager and Rosa Newmarch, still kind of like connected to the Society of Women Musicians activities. A third one, Lisa Lehman's one, and there is a predominantly male cluster around Hubert Parry and Herbert Cowles, who were the this kind of power couple in a way for the Royal College of Music back then. Yeah, so this is the weighted one with the again, we see there's a bit of a disparity of how many communities were detected by different methods, and this is actually the one that algorithm did, and the algorithm does it like in the simple words, basically on the frequency of the connections, and then a bit of other parameters, but mainly the frequency. And basically this one just showed the same number of communities, which is 13, for all the for the same network, but without assigned weighting. Yeah, so this is another slide with the consolidated metrics. And again, I don't really want, because there's too many numbers and stuff, but this is basically everything all at once in one slide, but this is like, yeah, the metrics and everything, just to sum it up, what I've been saying. So the what is interesting though is the correlation between the two methods is 0.64 for degree centrality and 0.6 for the betweener centrality. And this kind of like a strong agreement, but not identical, which is again interesting in terms of running these two different analyses on kind of like same data set, but with assigned and non-assigned weights. Yeah, so and another one was another nice picture is the temporal analysis. And this is the temporal analysis of the network kind of evolution. And we know what happened in the beginning of 20th century. The Society of Musicians was launched. But apart from that, it was the World War One and then the World War Two. And so the Marion score died in 1953. So our data set kind of like spanning till 1956, I think, the last record. So yeah, so within this kind of context, what we see is that the temporal analysis shows distinct structural changes across decades, revealing how Scott's network evolved in response to historical circumstances. From 909 to 1909, we see Scott at the center with many direct connections, but few interconnections between her contacts, suggesting an emergent hub-and-spoke structure. Then crucially, the period of 1910 and 1919 displays significantly more complex and dense networks with increased interconnections, coinciding precisely the Society of Musicians Foundation and also the World War One. And interestingly, during the World War One, it was still lots of men performing, but during the World War Two, sort of women take over because it was just too many people actually dying at war. So this increased interconnection validates our hypothesis that Society of Musicians actively facilitated network formation beyond simple hub and spoke patterns. And then the structural change we observed can be explained by only data collection methods alone. It respects historical dynamics as well. And again, we see the degrading of the sort of activities closer to 1953 because she died in 1953. So, and just to say what has been done in terms of publication around it, we did publish a data paper in the Journal of Open Humanities Data, and yeah, thank you both as an editors here present in the room. But apart from the data paper and like actually the crucial part of the data paper is actually make your data set available, which is now available in Zenodo. Both actually, both tabs, the one that has the connections and the other one that has just the IDs and sort of the demographics of the data set. Another thing that we've done already was last year I applied for the Curve Undergrad Research Fellowship, which allows you to have an undergrad working throughout the summer by your side. And what we did is we kind of transformed this quite boring spreadsheet into a bit less boring interactive kind of data set, which is now we call it digital collection, and it's based on Omeka, which is another low code, almost no code tool for us digital humanists. And what it allows you to do is we tag each kind of we tag occupation, we tag nationalities, we tag gender, we tag different people. So basically it's easy to do the search. So you can do like how many female in the data set, it will just show all the females, and or how many, you know, composers in the data set, it will show all the composers. So this was a bit of a, again, fun work for the fellow, but also for us because it's now openly available and everyone can look at what we've collected and done so far. And in terms of the future research, so we're currently working on a book, which will be a monograph, but will be co-authored with my colleague and collaborator. And this would be around actually method, because what we found out throughout our research and sort of collaboration together is that this kind of like between a centrality, which once was just the parameter for the SNA, now becoming a bit bigger thing, like a theoretical framework to kind of refine the definition of the creative leadership, specifically for the marginalized group when it's difficult to depict what kind of leader, what kind of influencer you were there when there was no Instagram or like Facebook or anything. So we kind of moved beyond this technical parameter towards the more theoretical grounding and understanding of how we can frame British modernism, how we can frame creative leadership within this kind of marginalized, a bit of informal networks. And yeah, the idea is to actually expand the data set to look at other women as well, starting probably with Catherine Eagle and Lisa Lehman, and sort of building up a bit more different other networks and compare them and have like a bigger data set with more data, because we're just obsessed with data, I guess, me particularly. So, and to sum it up or conclude, I'd like to think of how might our understanding, so have like pose the question basically, how might our understanding of cultural influence or creative leadership evolve if we complement traditional measures, focus on individual achievement and formal recognition with approach recognizing collaborative influence and network-based leadership. So this is the question mainly we're asking in the book. And sort of those who could bridge between different musical circles like Scott Eager, Lisa Lehman, performed essential but often invisible cultural labor, and traditional historiography or musicology focused on composed works and public performances has systematically kind of undervalued. And particularly within these, women, just because they were a bit, stayed as amateur musicians rather than professional ones. So we believe that our Middle Eastern region and social network analysis not only denote an awareness of the unusual, hidden and forgotten, but also make this work visible, quantifiable and historically significant, challenging us to reconsider not just Marion Scott's place in the music history, but also our entire framework for understanding cultural influence and creative networks. And I'm going to just sum it up with the slide of acknowledgement. So Dr. Christina Guillermier is my long-term friend and collaborator from Royal College of Music, and she's currently in Trinity Laban. And we had Luciana Perk with helping us actually collect the data, and she was our research assistant last year with a bit of a seed funding from Royal College of Music. So Alexander Yashkin-Dashkevich was the fellow from King's. He's currently, I think, at Oxford, trying to apply for our PhD, but the competition is quite rough. And we also have Maria Ballier from actually King's College London as our research assistant for this year, because we have a bit of a seed funding from Trinity Laban. So that's it. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer your questions.